Small group leadership. This is actually, when I do my teaching of lay people, this is actually the last lecture they ever receive. So we're going to go into more depth later on. Once we're starting with Rick Warren's book for next week. It's very little bit of reading involved in that. It's an easy peasy book. But that will be starting for next week. But today we're talking once again about the 5 elements of a small group. Now, I'm trusting we're pretty familiar with these now. That a good small group will be focused on the Word, will be focused on each other, worship, service, and evangelism. We're going to be looking at evangelism. Now, one of the challenges we have in the church, I'm going to call it the monastic trap. The reason why I call it the monastic trap is that when you think of a monastery, yeah, you know what? You've got a nice little group of Christians that do church together and do churchy things all the time. They pray together, they sing together, they work together. They're happy people, and they garden together, and they eat meals together, and it's just this little bit of heaven on earth, as long as you like being only with people of the same gender. But this little bit of heaven on earth, located far away in a fortress on a mountain. Not exactly particularly impactful. But our churches often operate this way, and our small groups operate this way, where the only people we know are Christians. The only people we hang out with are Christians. The only people we have impact on are Christians. One of the things I've noticed more and more in the church, and it's disturbed me, is that the very word revival has changed its meaning in recent years. Once upon a time, when you talked about like the great revivals of history, you're talking about great moves of evangelism. But now people have tossed that right the heck out. And so when we're talking about revival, we're talking about who cares about those people out there. Revival is just, we're getting excited again. We're going to have a revival. Oh man, that's not what it's about. And fundamentally, when we get to the core of the Great Commission, it's about reaching others. But that's not what we do. One of the things Pastor Kelly's talked a little bit, and I think this comes from Andy Stanley, is that the natural gravitational pull of a church or of a small group is to pull inwards, is to always look inside and become very insider focused. We're going to talk about how to break that and how it's actually awesome to break that. When our small groups actually include an element of reaching people, it does reinforce all the other elements. The Word and our study of the Word is going to be much more relevant when we're dealing with outreach. If we're actively engaging people in our lives and actually having conversations and knowing what's going on and what their concerns are, that will give us focus to our reading in the Word and give us another filter to look things through. Another filter can be really helpful in a church. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of inviting a non-Christian friend to church. I guarantee on that day, you saw church very differently. And I'm also pretty safe to guarantee that you had a lot of cringe moments where, ooh, I wish he hadn't said that. Ooh, I wish they didn't do that. And ooh, nasty things happened. And after church, you spent a lot of time apologizing. I know that's what's happened to me. And you get someone comes out there, they're like, I'm so glad, that I'm a Christian and not like those filthy heathens out there. Not you, buddy. When you've got somebody with you, yeah, it's not good. But you do have new eyes when you have somebody there. And you know what? We even have new eyes when we look at the Word, when we're thinking about, I can share some of this with a friend, assuming we have friends, which is a good thing to get. Relationships are built through outreach. Now, not just relationships with the people we're reaching out to, and that's certainly key, but relationships with each other. And relationships with each other and trust with each other is really, really, really important in outreach. I had an experience, and it was 20 years ago. I was just a summer intern at the church. I had no intention of ever being a pastor going into the ministry. But, I was a university student, had to get a summer job, and the church hired me. And I thought, ooh, that's cool. We had a big joint youth event with a whole bunch of other churches in the city. We went the big concert hall Yates downtown, and we rented that and set it up sort of like the David Letterman show, and one of the youth pastors was a real comedian, and it was funny and stuff like that. I thought, oh man, this is going to be awesome. We've done it a couple times before. And so I used this as an opportunity to invite my sister-in-law, who was a teenager at the time. And she, even though she didn't come from a Christian family, she, among all of my sister-in-laws, and I have 4 of them, she was the one who really showed interest in Christianity and interest in spiritual things. We thought, you know what, she's reachable. So I invited her out. Hey, yeah, come out like that. So she came out, and we were a fairly small youth group, but there was probably maybe 5 other girls her age in our youth group. And she kind of sat with them, and they proceeded to pretty much treat her as utterly invisible. Now, they weren't mean-hearted girls, but they're there with their friends, and they're talking to their friends, and they're focused on their friends. And, oh yeah, there's somebody else sitting over here who kind of came in. I don't know who she is. So they focused on their friends. During their intermission, they went and ran into more friends from another youth group. And, we're sitting way over here. And so they went and they joined their other friends. And so my sister-in-law, who got abandoned during the intermission, comes back to her seat, and she's the only person sitting in her row. That was, more than 20 years ago. And it took 20 years for her to ever darken the doors of a church again. Somebody who was spiritually open became very, very spiritually closed. Your relationships and your trust with each other is an important part of evangelism. That if you bring a friend, you need to be able to trust. And I mean, not foolishly trust, because you guys need to get it into your head. If she brings a friend, you're going to treat that friend well. You're going to make them feel welcome. You're not going to drop the ball. So as a group collectively, you need to know that, hey, if somebody brings somebody, I am going to go way out of my way to make them feel included. That is an important element. And that's going to build your relationships once you have that kind of trust. Your prayers are going to be much more selfless with outreach. We mentioned this a couple weeks ago, that if all your prayer requests were answered today, how many lives would be changed, or would it just be you? When we're actually reaching people, then we start actually praying for them. And it enriches our prayer life, not only with intensity, but also diversity. Our service becomes more meaningful with outreach. We start understanding some of the whys behind our service. We start seeing some of the lives impacted. I'd mentioned before that with our usher and greeter teams, one of the things that I share with them is when we get Connect cards come in, we say, what was your best part of the service? Is how friendly people were to me. People's lives are changed because of service. Something else, and you may not have heard me tell you this, but it's absolutely true. One of the biggest reasons why people will not return to a church after they visit it, and it's in the top 3, is dirty bathrooms. Churches with dirty bathrooms, people are disgusted and don't want to come back. That means, if you flip on the other side of the coin, lives are changed and destinies are altered because we have good janitorial. Cleaning those toilets saves souls. It actually does. We don't think about that. But when we are actually actively reaching people, then all our service activities can take on new meaning. And when that does, it brings on new strength that, you know what, I am going to scrub this toilet because you know what, it just might seem like a toilet to everybody else, but I'm saving lives when I'm doing this. And the fact is, they are. Good preaching, good music, good environments, friendly ushers and greeters, all these things have tremendous meaning, particularly when we think about the result and the impact that they're having. We talked about this before. Discipleship is best done through learning by doing. And we can talk about the Great Commission all we like. I was pastoring a church where there was a big motto painted on the wall that we are a community of servants fulfilling the Great Commission. And it's on the wall every day there to see. But you know what? That's all it was paint on the wall. We did some little statistical analysis of our church. And I'd seen some statistics before where, and these are American ones, but the average American Christian takes 87 years to reach one other person for Christ. At my last church, prior to my arrival there, when we crunched the numbers soon after I arrived, we figured out it took the average person in that church 500 years to reach one other person for Christ. They were really, really, really bad statistics. So just talking about it, that isn't an effective way of doing discipleship. You do it by doing. And we can talk about the Great Commission all we like, but until we actually do it, we're not actually advancing in discipleship. And discipleship, there's some churches that separate discipleship from evangelism. That there's evangelism here and then there's discipleship. And I've heard pastors say, oh yeah, our church doesn't do evangelism, we do discipleship. Well, how did Jesus disciple the disciples? By using them to do evangelism. Evangelism was part of discipleship. And your discipleship strategy, if it doesn't include any evangelism element, it's not discipleship. It's weak, it's lame, it's morbid. All right. How can we raise awareness of evangelism in our small groups? Real simple way number one is share your own testimony. Now, this is something as a small group leader that you should do first. But start off and tell your story. How did you come to Christ? Who are the people who are instrumental in bringing you to Christ? Sometimes sharing your own testimony involves sharing your parents' testimonies. Because if you grew up, hey, mom led me to Christ, when I was 4. Actually, my oldest son was led to Christ. Yeah, he's probably about 4. By some little VHS tape with talking bears. And these, it's people in bear suits, explain the gospel to him in this VHS tape. And I remember coming back from work, and my wife and my son, they were so excited that he gave his heart to Jesus because he was watching this bear tape. So people might have felt silly at the time dressing in those bear costumes, but they changed my son's life. But sometimes it might be our parents' story. If we were raised in a Christian home, well, then how did my parents come to the Lord? What happened to reach our family? But share your testimony and then encourage other people in your group to share their stories. Why are you a Christian? Who helped you become a Christian? Who told you about God? So that is a good starter. Another thing you can do is in your group, talk about the people that you care about. Talk about your friend Cindy or your buddy Dave or Al who's struggling with this or Tim who's struggling with that or whatever. Talk about the people in your life who don't know Christ and talk about them like they're important because they are. Then share your sharing stories. In my own life, this has been one of the most encouraging things I've ever done. When I graduated from university, I worked for a year as an interim youth pastor. Was planning to go into business, wasn't planning on being a pastor at all. But my church associate pastor quit suddenly. Nobody was there to fill the gap. I hadn't started my business yet. And so when the church asked me, hey, can you step in temporarily? I thought, sure, no problem. I mean, how long does it take to find a permanent youth pastor? Like 6 weeks. Ended up taking a year. And I ended up having an absolutely awesome time. By the end of that year, I decided, you know what? Maybe going to business is not what I should be doing. I should go and train to be a pastor. However, my wife still had a year left of her ed degree. So the church had found a youth pastor, so my replacement had already arrived, and I had to find another job. The other job I had was actually working at Walmart. So I was working at Walmart. And a buddy of mine, he was in a similar situation. He was planning on being a pastor, but he had a year to do. He was working with a number of different agencies, Rehoboth, Quest, some of those kinds of agencies here in town, helping handicapped people. And what we would do is that we would phone each other 2-3 times a week and share our sharing stories. Hey, did you get any good discussions today? Oh, yeah, I was talking to this Mormon guy. We were talking about this. Oh, really? I was talking to this guy. Oh, really? Yeah. Well, I was talking to this, this lapsed Catholic girl. And, oh, yeah, really? Well, I was talking to, to this guy who's into witchcraft. And, he calls himself a warlock. And, I was talking to this lady, and she's into native spirituality. And so we would constantly, even though we had totally different workplaces, we ran into people at work all the time, and whenever we had a cool conversation, we would share our sharing stories. And that kept the temperature hot. Because when you start hearing about someone, wow, that sounds like a really cool conversation you had with that person. I wonder if I can have a cool conversation too. Well, really, how did you get that conversation started? So sharing your sharing stories within your group, and that's an awesome way to increase that temperature. A fourth thing you can do is you can pray for people. You got your buddy Dave, Tim, Steve, Lisa, Brenda, whatever. Pray for them. Have your group pray for them. They're having a tough time in this or whatever. You know what? I had a great conversation with them about that. Bring that up in your group during your prayer times. So these are things that help evangelism awareness. And lastly, there's something that some groups do, and it's called the empty chair. And that is when you physically set up your small group, set out an empty chair. And let everybody know that empty chair is for somebody who hasn't come to our group yet. It's for one of our friends that we're trying to reach. And pray for that empty chair. Now, not the chair itself, literally. Lord, I pray that, only liked people will ever sit on this chair. No, it's pray for whoever's going to be sitting in the chair, even though you don't know who that might be. But the empty chair, and that gives us a visual reminder that, we still have work to do. Evangelism training is something that you can do right within your small group. And this is really, really cool. And we've got access to a number of different training programs. One of them, and this is right on Right Now Media that we have access to, is called Just Walk Across the Room. Now, this is actually the only one I've never done, but I've heard good things about it. It's just a program that teaches you how to engage in conversations. Because most Christians have never actually talked to a non-Christian about anything spiritual and just don't have the first clue how they possibly do that. Sometimes we get a lot of false conceptions about what evangelism is. And this is just a useful tool that collectively as a group you could spend, I think that's only like 4 weeks long. We're going to spend 4 weeks and we're going to take this course. Another course, and this is 6 weeks long, is called Bursting Your Bubble. Now, what I like about this one is it was put together actually in Calgary. So it's actually a Canadian course by a guy who was just really, really, really effective at personal evangelism. And so people said, hey, man, you got to show us how to do this. And so it's sort of shot entirely in a Starbucks. And this guy just shares basic principles on how you can start conversations with people, how you can develop friendships with people, how you can get involved in their lives. So really, really good course. Actually, I have this. So if you guys are interested in that, just let me know. My favorite is this one, Becoming a Contagious Christian. Now, I think that's 8 weeks. And they've redone that and modernized it. Although it looks hokey, I still prefer the old one. Where you've got like all these 90s people with 90s clothes and hair. They're a little funny looking. It is American and culturally maybe a tiny bit different, but the principles are super cool. And I've seen such good things come out of this. I remember one of my churches out in BC, I was talking to a guy in our church who had sort of recently reignited his spiritual life. But when I talked about evangelism, he said, man, I can never actually talk to anybody about God or anything like that. And particularly any coworker, and there's rules and, evangelism is just completely and utterly impossible, cannot be done in any way, shape, or form. Took this course and I was like, oh, now I see how you do it. This is great for busting misconceptions because a lot of people think, what is evangelism? Well, it's, getting a soapbox and standing on the street saying, you are sinners. And that's what they think evangelism is. Or you've got to be like super charismatic, Billy Graham or something like that. The first lesson in becoming a contagious Christian, and I absolutely love it. Everybody takes what I would call a Cosmo quiz. Cosmopolitan magazine has little quizzes that you can take in it. But it's almost like a little personality test. And everybody in the group takes this personality test. And then the test will rank you in different personality types and different evangelism gifts. So some people, there's the confrontational, and there's like 6 different styles that they give. There's a confrontational style of evangelism. And this is kind of like the Apostle Peter. So it gives you a biblical example. And this is, maybe not exactly street preachers, but people who can just right out of the blue, bring up God. Man, looks like you're having a hard time. You need Jesus. So, and then it gives you tips on how you can further develop your style because it suits your personality. And then, some cautions that, hey, don't be a bull in a china shop because that's what your style can sometimes be. And then some people, they might rank high in the intellectual style. Oh, it's kind of like the Apostle Paul. And here's ways that you can develop your skills there. Here's how you can use your style that fits your personality. And here's some things that you can avoid. Then there's the invitational style, like the woman at the well who went and invited all her friends to meet Jesus. Maybe you're not really confrontational and maybe you're not very intellectual, but you know what? You're really good at gathering people and inviting them out to things. Here's how you can use your style. Then there's the service style. And this is, they use the example of Tabitha in the New Testament, sometimes known as Dorcas. And what she does is she makes clothes for poor people. And so it tells you how you can use, you might be a little bit more shy, you might be more of an introvert, but how can you use your style to reach people? And words of caution too, that it's great that you can serve, but if they don't know why you're serving, if you never bring up Jesus, that can be a weakness in your style. There's the friendship style. So there's all these different styles, and there's 6 of them. And the cool thing is everybody who takes this, as a general, nobody before they take it thinks that they could ever do this. Man, yeah, that's like, that's only for the kind of guys. That's not me. Once they've taken this, and it's the first class, they realize, you know what? Okay, I see this. You know what? That I don't have to be somebody who I'm not. That I can use the personality traits that God gave me to reach people. Excellent course. and lots of role playing and different things like that, and different ways to explain the gospel you go through. I love this, and have seen tremendous effect through it. Doable evangelism is something else I've been a fan of. And I haven't seen any video curriculum or anything for it, but I can teach you doable evangelism right here, right now. It's called doable evangelism because it's evangelism that literally anybody could do. And the authors of sort of the system, as such as is, they compared it to T-ball. I don't know if you guys ever seen a game of T-ball, but you get these little kids, and they got balls like already on a stand, and they're like, 5-year-olds. And, as long as they hit the stand and, try as many times, like you can't strike out in T-ball, and that ball falls off, everybody's clapping. Okay? Well, it's simplifying evangelism down to that. And I've actually done this in one of my previous churches, actually the one that was really, really, really bad at evangelism. Started off with this. So week number 1, here is the homework assignment. Okay? And you think, oh man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I think you can. Week number 1, here's the assignment. Notice somebody else exists. That's it. All you have to do is notice that there's somebody else alive on planet Earth that isn't you. So you might be out grocery shopping and you're buying groceries and there's the cashier there. It's got a name tag Lisa, and you notice Lisa exists. Good. You completed your homework. That might sound silly, but one of the problems with evangelism, why people don't do evangelism, is because they don't notice anybody else exists. Just like I talk about our prayer lives. If all your prayers were answered, would anybody's life change or just yours? Okay? We become so intensely self-absorbed that we don't notice that other people exist on our planet. So this is actually a very important first step. Notice that other people in the world exist. That's week number 1. Week number 2, say a stealth prayer. So this is like learning how to be a praying ninja. Now I'll tell you what a stealth prayer is. A stealth prayer is a prayer that nobody can see you praying. And you're saying it silently. You're not even closing your eyes. So next time you're at the grocery store and you see Lisa again, smile at Lisa and then pray. She won't be able to hear this. Dear God, bless Lisa. It's like a ninja of prayer. She didn't even see you. Nobody had any clue that you just prayed for that girl. Now, why is that important? Now, it's still in the realm of doable. Yeah, you know what? I think I can secretly pray for somebody without them knowing about it. Well, it's noticing that they exist and caring about their spiritual welfare. So it's becoming spiritually aware. You're aware that people exist and you're aware of their spiritual welfare. So that's really important. Week 3, now this is the most difficult week at all. And it's the last week. And it is ask, how are you doing? Now, there's detail here. So when you ask them, how are you doing? They will answer, fine. Okay, that's how people answer that question. And then you do this. So watch what I do here. You ask the question, how are you doing? And they say, fine. And then you tilt your head, lean in, and say, really? Okay, that's doable. Tilt head, lean in. Really? When you do that, even the complete strangers, they change their answer. They change their answer, and it's like the craziest thing. Because socially, when we say this, the answer is fine no matter what's happening. When you do the head tilt, lean in, really, it shows them, though, you're actually asking how they are. You actually give a flying rat's behind about their life. And hold on, because you have no idea what they're going to say. You know what? Actually, my husband just lost his job. You know what? Actually, my wife just left me. We're trying to get our son into rehab. I mean, like, holy cow. You will not believe what happens when you open that box. Okay, so you get an answer from that, really. And they say, you know what, my kid, trying to get our kid into rehab. Your response to that is this, one word: wow. This is actually a crazy powerful word. It communicates that what you said was really important. That you heard what they said, and you appreciated the weight of what they said. Just wow. So I did this with my last church, and there was a little bit of snickering, and I explained the reasons why, and then I told them to do this. And the week after, holy cow, stories just kept flooding in from really, really excited people who had actually tried this. I cannot believe there's this other mom, that we drop our kids off, at kindergarten together, and I did this, and she told me, whoa, and we got into this conversation that went on for an hour. Like crazy simple, T-ball simple. But amazing things can come out of that. And once the conversation, like that hour-long part, you know what? You need to trust that God's going to have your back. But one of the things that may occur to you after you've done this a few times is you're really interested in these courses. Ooh, we got into a real good conversation, and I didn't know what to say, and I didn't know how to explain. Can we look at that again? Can we try that? But yeah, doable evangelism, and this is something that you can easily do in your small group. Hey, we're going to try 3 weeks of homework. Let's see if we can pull this off. But it can make a big, big, big difference. Evangelism Action. As a small group, you can host your own evangelistic events. Have a party. Don't get together for Bible study, but get together for a party and invite some friends. You don't have to preach at them. You don't have to sing. You don't have to pray at them. Just invite some friends. And make sure, as I mentioned before, that all of you guys know that if somebody else brings a friend, that you're going to treat their friend really, really well. That you're going to make them feel welcome and included. Okay, you do not want to have the experience that I had. But yeah, now it doesn't necessarily have to be a barbecue. It could be rock climbing. You guys can go out shooting, paintball, knitting, macrame, I don't know, paper making. Whatever activity that your group is kind of into, do that. Could be board gaming. Could be like a really nerd cosplay party. I mean, I don't know. Whatever you're into. God's made you the way you are for a reason. Run with that. You can also, particularly at this church, and for those who are taking this course online, I don't know about your church, but at this church, our church is designed to make non-Christians feel welcome. Our church is designed that our sermons are understandable-ish, that our music, that we don't do anything weird that's going to freak them out or scare them away. You know what? Our church is really, really designed to facilitate inviting friends. Now, not everybody's church is like that, in which case you should probably invite them to our church or find a church. And we even have that happening in our community, where we'll have someone who goes to a very traditional church, or maybe a very, very hyper-charismatic, smack you in the head, knock everybody down kind of church. And you'll get a sense in your heart, well, you know what, in my church, I'm not sure if my friend would really be into what we're into. Then find another church in your community that is designed to invite non-Christians to. And chances are, I certainly hope, that there will be a church nearby that you can invite them to, that, you know what, they're going to hear a gospel message. They're going to be treated well. And if there is not, well, then maybe you should have a conversation with your pastor about thinking about that for your own church. But inviting friends to church is something that we can do. Your group can also host an alpha course or H2O. Now, H2O is similar to alpha. It's American rather than English. But it's also really, really cool. E3 has used, I think they've used both of them. But if you've got friends who are actually interested in, I wouldn't mind finding out about this. This is a great way to include them. Now, if you are going to do alpha or H2O, as a group, take the training beforehand. And the training isn't going to be super foreign to you who are taking this course, because a lot of the training is learning how to be a facilitator. Because if you've got Christians in a group designed to reach non-Christians, as soon as they start asking questions, there's the little kid inside of you that, oh, I know the answer. And if one of your friends gives a wrong answer, heresy, blasphemy. Okay, so take the training so your group learns how to deal with those people effectively. That, if you bring a friend and when they're talking about God or what they think about God and they say something that's a little bit weird, instead of condemning them as heretics and trying to fight with them or argue with them, they'll learn to say, that's an interesting way of looking at it. I've never looked at it that way before. Because the way you treat them and the honor and the respect that you give them will determine the amount they respect you and how much honor and respect they'll give you. The more open-minded you are to them and actually give them a fair hearing, the more open-minded they'll be to you. So that's not a bad idea, but that's something really cool, really easy that you can do as a small group. And then lastly, and it's come up at least 3 different times now, think about doing some kind of a short-term mission. There are opportunities for you guys to learn how to do evangelism. And sometimes this isn't the last step, but this sometimes can be a first step. It's a little bit easier, oddly enough, to reach out to complete and utter strangers in another city, in another culture perhaps even, than it is to reach somebody who actually knows you. So short-term missions can be a good way for you to open your eyes and get your group to experience some things with evangelism. All this stuff make sense? Awesome, and we are done early.